Radio is an intimate storytelling medium, and when it bonds with one of the finest storytellers of our times, the result is sheer magic. During these times of social distancing, All India Radio hopes to bring you some comfort, some connection, with an exclusive story reading series, Bonding over the Radio. Coming up is the pick of the day, voiced by the author Ruskin Bond himself.
A Face in the Dark. Mr. Oliver, an Anglo-Indian school teacher, was returning to his school late one night on the outskirts of the hill station of Shimla. From before Kipling's time, the school had been run on English public school lines, and the boys, most of them from wealthy Indian families, wore blazers, caps and ties. Even Life magazine, in a feature on India, had once called it the Eton of the East. And Mr. Oliver had been teaching in the school for a number of years. The Simla Bazaar, with its cinemas and restaurants, was about 3 miles from the school. And Mr. Oliver, a bachelor, usually strolled into the town in the evening, returning after dark, when he would take a shortcut through the pine forest. When there was a strong wind, the pine trees made sad, eerie sounds that kept most people to the main road. But Mr. Oliver was not a nervous or imaginative man. He carried a torch, and its gleam, the batteries were running down, moved fitfully down the narrow forest path. When its flickering light fell on the figure of a boy who was sitting alone on a rock, Mr. Oliver stopped. Boys were not supposed to be out after dark. "What are you doing out here, boy?" asked Mr. Oliver sharply, moving closer so that he could recognize the miscreant. But even as he approached the boy, Mr. Oliver sensed that something was wrong. The boy appeared to be crying. His head hung down. He held his face in his hands, and his body shook convulsively. It was a strange, soundless weeping, and Mr. Oliver felt distinctly uneasy. "Why, what's the matter?" he asked, his anger giving way to concern. "What are you crying for?" The boy would not answer or look up. His body continued to be racked with silent sobbing. "Come on, boy, you shouldn't be out here at this hour. Tell me the trouble. Look up." The boy looked up. He took his hands from his face and looked up at his teacher. The light from Mr. Oliver's torch fell on the boy's face, if you could call it a face. It had no eyes, ears, nose, or mouth. It was just a round, smooth head with a school cap on top of it. And that's where the story should end. But for Mr. Oliver did not end quite there. The torch fell from his trembling hand. He turned and scrambled down the path, running blindly through the trees and calling for help. He was still running towards the school buildings when he saw a lantern swinging in the middle of the path. Mr. Oliver stumbled up to the watchman, the chowkidar. He was gasping for breath. "What is it, Sahib?" asked the watchman. "Has there been an accident? Why are you running?" I saw something horrible. A boy weeping in the forest, and he had no face." "No face, Sahib? No eyes, nose, mouth, nothing? Do you mean it was like mine, Sahib?" asked the chowkidar and raised the lamp to his own face. The watchman had no eyes, no ears, no features at all, not even an eyebrow. And that's when the wind blew the lamp out. when I first wrote this story, it had one more sentence which said, and then Mr. Oliver had his heart attack. But when this story was put into the school curriculum sometime back, they said, no, we can't have the teacher having a heart attack. So they censored and took out the last line.
What is this fascination with ghost stories, sir, if one can ask?
I have to confess I never met a ghost. But I enjoy reading ghost stories because when I was very young, some of the first books I read were ghost stories, There was a writer called M.R. James who wrote a number of them and others. So I was quite fascinated with the genre. And then later on, whenever I felt like it, I'd write a spooky story. And then hill stations are supposed to be full of ghosts and haunted bungalows. Actually, more or less what you call British ghosts. But of course, in our rural India, we have lots of ghosts, boots and crypts and trails and all sorts of things. So, part of folklore, I guess.
10-year-old Pritish is writing from Gurgaon.
Yes.
He says, I gifted your 2 books, The Lagoon and School Days, to my mother on her birthday.
Right.
By mistake, my mother slipped the book behind the bed.
Oh, that's
I wish I could have a long tongue like Henry the chameleon and I could take it out.
So is it still under the bed?
Yeah, we must ask his mom.
Huh?
We must ask his mom.
You ask your mom, please rescue the book. Otherwise, Mr. Bond will have to send another copy from Mussoorie.
Hopefully not a chameleon.
Yes, or send a chameleon. Very hard to find a chameleon. Easier to get another copy of the book. Okay.
Then there is Trisrota Dhar from Kolkata.
Yes.
She says she's been regularly listening to this program on radio.
Nice.
And then she said, I heard the black cat and it brought back a memory. I had the story as our text in class 7. I remember that when the story was being read, I suddenly saw a cat entering our classroom.
Oh.
I was so startled that I sat up and taking a good look, I found that it was gone.
Oh.
Bit like the Cheshire cat, sir.
The cat had come to listen to the story. It knew there was a story going on about another black cat.
None of her friends saw it. So she says that she must have hallucinated.
Yes.
Seeing the cat was the effect of your wonderful story. I just wanted to share this memory. I have a question, sir.
Yes.
I love the story, The Playing Fields of Shimla.
Right.
And the story is written with Rusty as the main character.
Yes.
And her question is, was it completely a fictional story? Or did you really have a friend named Omar in your school days, sir?
It's a true story. I did change 1 or 2 names in it. Of course, here and there, relying on memory, so where I have to describe an event or other characters, or put in dialogue, naturally, I would have to rely on memory, which would not be perfect. Otherwise, it is a true story, yes.
But your memory for names and places is phenomenal.
Yes, not bad. I have a very good memory for childhood and boyhood, for those early days. Well, and for yesterday too. I haven't got Alzheimer's yet.
We hope you don't get it ever.
No,
Sir, Trisrota is still there, and she's saying, my brother is requesting you to read the story Ghost Trouble one day, please.
And now, Ghost Trouble, again, it runs to about, I think, if I read it 20-25 minutes, it would take. If I can maybe shorten it or find a shorter version, I'll do that.
Now we have Saranya Iyer. Wow, I listened to the chameleon story and I was in splits.
Thank you.
My 4-year-old daughter comes and sits on my lap to listen to the stories too. She is thrilled to hear your voice, though I think she can hardly decipher at her age of what is going on the radio.
Right.
But I am enjoying this time, and I am enjoying her listening to you regale the stories from your books.
Oh, good.
I would want to listen to some of your stories from the book With Love from Hills and Tales from the Himalayas.
Achha.
Thank you, sir, for coming for us on air and making our time worthwhile.
Thank you so much. And I hope you'll listen to more stories. Most of them are, in fact, set here in the hills, with a Himalayan background. And just as the Blue Umbrella is, and that you'll be listening to maybe in a day or two.
Sir, then there is Shrabanta Bag. My sister Shrabana Bag, a 16-year-old schoolgirl, urges me to send you this message. Sir, lots of love and respect to you. I always dream to meet you and ask you, how can you be so innocent and loving? I feel you have a pure and delighted soul. And she also mentions the blue umbrella being her favorite story, and Binya resides deep in her heart.
Yes. Well, I don't know why everyone thinks I'm innocent. I was a very naughty boy when I was at school and before. But I think maybe as I grew older, I've improved a bit, I hope.
So we'll take one last question for today. This is from Dhwani Shah. I am 20, and though I remember your essence through all the stories which I read 10 years ago, I have forgotten the details. I just heard you read The Eyes Have It, and I remembered how much I loved this one story, and how I asked all my friends to read it and would narrate it to others in the lunch break at school. Starting my day with your voice makes me so happy, and I'm sure everyone feels the same way. And I've never been to Mussoorie, but I am making the trip as soon as possible to meet you.
Well, thank you. And you know, The Eyes Have It was one of my earliest stories. I wrote it in 1955. I think when your father was born or before that. And it's nice to know it's still around because it keeps coming in anthologies and collections. So though one of my earliest, it's also one of my best. So it shows that you can write a good story at any age. So if you want to be a writer, don't hesitate. Go ahead.
That was storyteller par excellence, Ruskin Bond, reading his hand-picked story of the day in our exclusive series, Bonding over the Radio. Ruskin Bond needs no introduction. Much loved by generations for his enduring and inspiring writing, he is an iconic and prolific literateur, honoured with the Padma Bhushan and Sahitya Akademi Awards. Some of his works that have been adapted for film and television series include Junoon, Susanna's 7 Husbands, Saat Khoon Maaf, The Blue Umbrella, and Ek Tha Rusty. A presentation of the Central English Features Unit. This came to you from the External Services Division of All India Radio.